as of now. So the session has started recording. Okay, let's get into JavaScript part 2. So let's present this. JavaScript part 2. Today we're going to get into functions, which is a really exciting topic. It comes up a lot in a lot of different kinds of code. Oh, I guess the leaves were a thing this week. Functions. A function is a block of code you can reuse without copying and pasting it every time. That's an interesting way to think about it. I like to think of a function as a specific instruction set that is used when you call upon it. So it's basically like saying like, oh, like you write out a function, and a function is like a given set of instructions that a computer completes, and then you can call on that function. That's what it means when you can reuse it. You can call on it and it will just do the instruction set. You don't have to rewrite it out. You can just call on it. Each function is designed to do one task. Yeah, that's pretty true. I know we have an example today where like if you want to add a counter, you can add that on into a function. So I think one task is a little bit limiting, but generally speaking, you're going to use like one function per task, especially when you're learning code, because it keeps everything organized. And functions are executed when they are called. That's what that means. You can reuse them. They're called. So let's go over the syntax of a function. This is what all functions are going to really look like. So this is a function we have, and I'm going to go through it in simple English. We're going to talk about what it does, and then we're going to go through the syntax of it. So this function called askName will trigger an alert that says hello, and it will have a prompt that asks you what your name is, where you can fill in your name. Now, syntax. Functions, you always have to declare it with the keyword function to say this is a function. So by declaring it function, you always do that. And that's always the first thing you do in a function. Function, name of function. So you can name it pineapple. You can name it banana. You can name it, but in this case, it's askName. I always recommend naming it something that has meaning to what the function is executing so that you can like organize your code better, but you can name it whatever you want. You can't name it something that is an already given operator, so you can't have a function named function because the computer will get confused in terms of like what you're asking it to do. So like you can't have a function that's like an inherent, like, so there's inherent functions, and we're going to talk about those later, but you can't name a function name that's an inherent function. So you can't name it like, this is a Java example, but like math.random picks a random number. You can't name a function math.random because it will get confused. So just pick something that's like a normal English word, and you'll generally be okay. Then we have the code that is within the function. And remember, it's always within these two curly brackets. So we always have our code that's within these two curly brackets, and then we have our code that is our function, so it's our instruction set. And then, does anyone see this? This is outside of the function. So this is no longer part of the code of the function. This is outside of the function, and this is how we call upon a function. So you just see this, the askName. So it's just the name of the functions with the parentheses, and then we always end our code segments with a semicolon, so we just do that. So basically when you call upon a function, you just execute this code by just saying this. Okay, we'll move on.
I actually have a question.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
So with the two parentheses, is that just a way to mark the name of the function, like mark it as a function, or?
It's a little different. It's iffy. I know at least like in here, so by putting nothing in here, you kind of just establish it as like a normal function, like quote unquote normal function. But you can put data types in here that specify what kind of data types are being used within the function. But a lot of the times, like, especially when you're doing simple stuff, you won't need it, but you could do like askName string, askName integer b, or something like that. And that brings in certain things that you can then work within the function. A lot of the times you're going to see that with like integers, if you want to use, if you want to like make a function that works with integers. So you could have like askName, okay, say I want a function that says dice roll. So I have a function called dice roll, and the dice function basically just picks a random number from 1 to 6. So I would do like function dice roll. In here I could have like integer d.
Okay.
Or like int d. which tells me I'm working with an integer. But yeah, generally you're not going to put anything in here unless you're working with a specific data type.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, good question though. Functions continued. So using functions will generally, will greatly reduce the amount of code necessary to do a task. So this is the code execution for, remember our function over there, but if we wanted to just call the function 4 times, like we just wanted the code to execute 4 times, instead of rewriting it out 4 times, we can just call the function 4 different times. So that's why we like to use functions, because it's a one instruction set. We write it once, and then we can call upon it whenever we need it. Functions continued. So functions can have parameters. This is what you were talking about. This is like the parameter thing. Parameters are variables declared in the parentheses at the top of the function. Remember, I used the example like integer b. That could be a fun variable. So in this scenario, we're using a string variable called greeting. So they're assigned values in the function call. In the parentheses of a function call, you add values to be assigned to the parameters, and the values in the function are called arguments. So these variables can be used within the scope of the function, the curly brackets. Let's go through this in normal English. Function ask name greeting. So this is our parameter. Our parameter is a string variable called greeting. Yes? So it's not an integer. It's not a Boolean. It's a string variable called greeting. And we know it's a string variable because we know it's going to be printed out, and we can see it over here. Yes. So alert greeting. So alert greeting, that's us asking it to assign the input of the alert as the variable, right? Because we don't know what it is yet. So by saying alert greeting, you're saying, okay, whatever is the answer to this question, this prompt alert, whatever the answer to that question is, we're going to assign it as the variable greeting. So whatever gets put in that text box is now known to the computer as a string variable greeting, and then console.log greeting. This helps us because we have no idea what the answer to the question, what is your name, going to be? So by assigning it an unknown, undetermined string variable like greeting, we can just say, okay, well, whatever the value is, we don't know what it is. It's just going to be assigned greeting. And then whatever the value is, it can just be printed out as greeting. Yes? It's a little weird. But this one also gets into arguments. So like ask name, how is it going? Argument. So I'm going to get my pointer, and I hate this little bottom bar because it always interferes with our code. But I'm going to try and not move my cursor really quick so we can talk about it. Okay, everyone see line 7? Ask name, how is it going? This is an argument. This is where we are going to apply our function in a real world example. So remember how we called on a function and we said function name and then 2 like parentheses. Yes, that is the word, parentheses. Ask name, parentheses. So now ask name is gonna take the information given to it and then address it. So in this example, it's gonna print, so it's gonna, first what it's gonna do when you call on this function by saying ask name, how's it going? What the computer's gonna do, it's gonna show an alert, and the alert is gonna have an input box that says, what is your name? You put your name in, so I would put Willa, and then you would press enter, it would go into the system. The system would take my name, Willa, assign it to the value of greeting, and on the console, which is that black square that you would see in Replit, it would print, how is it going, Willa? No, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. It would just print, how is it going? But if we had it as, how is it going, plus, remember our concatenated statements? So if we said, how is it going plus greeting, it would say, how is it going plus, how is it going, Willa? But for right now, it just says, how is it going? And then it stores my name as the variable greeting. I'm sure there's questions.
Okay. Yeah, we do have one question.
Go
So,
ahead.
okay. So input in the parentheses becomes the identity label of the user's answer.
Yes. If I'm understanding that question right. Yes. So basically by putting, see this greeting is basically like the ID badge of the variable, right? So like say you have a math equation where x is equal to 5, but you don't know that yet, right? You just know that you have the variable x. So the variable x in your mind, before you know that it's equal to a specific number, can be any number. Therefore, it's just the identity that you give the unknown number. It's the exact same way, but we're going to use it for unknown words instead of unknown numbers. Yes, no, maybe.
And then in addition to that is, and the input in the bottom, ask name works differently from the input in the first function, ask a name, right? Or ask a name.
So ask name.
So the input in the bottom.
I think when you say lines, I think when you say the bottom, I think you're talking about line 7. So I'm going to leave it here. Line 7 is not an input. I mean, it kind of is. What is being asked here? The function ask name has an input variable. The input variable is called greeting. Yes? So whenever you call the function ask name, as you're doing in line 7, you get an input variable of name or of greeting, which is the name, right? But that's not what's happening in, I mean, it's what's happening in 7, but line 7, basically what it does is it just says, it takes all your information, that's great, but it just prints how's it going to the console, right? So it's like, well, I don't like this example code. I don't like this example code. Let's go back. So see how we have all of these things and it's like just ask name? By doing this line 11, just this ask name, we just have this hello, what is your name? The next slide, we assign the value, like the input value of the name to a variable, and then we add like how's it going. So it will say like, oh, how's it going? Your name, but it doesn't say your name because it's not a concatenated statement. I think it should. I think that would be a better example, but it doesn't. Arguments and parameters example. I think this would have been helpful to look at. So we're going to do it. We're going to go through it quick. When you call I'm sorry. Okay. Let's go through it again in the visual format. So function ask name greeting. Alert greeting prompt what is your name. Greeting is referring to how's it going, not what is your name. What is your name is a different variable, but greeting gets inserted to here because when you put how's it going gets established as the greeting. So it gets inserted in. That's what that means. I'm sorry, I made such a big error. I've been coding in different languages. I have made a mistake. So when you call the function and you do this, so by saying ask name, when we say ask name, we make a string variable called greeting. I didn't get that wrong. So we say ask name greeting. Greeting is the string variable here. That's great. So console log greeting. We create a string variable called greeting. When we say ask name, how's it going? We take this input, this text input, and we establish it as the value greeting. It's not the what is your name, it's the how's it going. So it's still a string variable. It's still a variable that gets used within the function, but it's just how's it going? Yes? So now greeting is the how's it going. So console.log greeting, see our string variable greeting will print how's it going on the console. Now, because it's an alert, the parameter greeting can now be used within the function just like a variable. How's it going? Does that make more sense? I'm sorry I messed it up, guys. I really do apologize. Okay, arrow functions. Arrow functions are a more condensed version of regular functions. They allow you to create a function without giving it a name. So we had a little bit of a meeting on arrow functions. This is a literal I hate this. I don't like this. So this tells me literally nothing about what an arrow function is. So arrow functions, they can act as like not accelerators, but like it just condenses the regular function code down. Yes, it allows you to create a function without giving it a name. I don't recommend doing this. Like when you guys are just learning how to code, do not give functions that don't have names right now. You know, and I'm not saying this because I don't doubt your coding ability. I'm saying this because I have made these mistakes and I have like lost a lot of work, or I've deleted things that I didn't realize that I shouldn't be deleting. Give names to things. It helps you organize. It helps you realize what things are happening. It helps you organize things. It helps you call on specific things you want to call on. So even if you want to use arrow functions, don't create a function without a name, in my recommendation, because I think that it can be really confusing, and I think you can like lose things and lose track of things really easily, and you can just confuse yourself unnecessarily. So I don't recommend doing this. But yes, arrow functions are a more condensed version of regular functions. I think this is a really bad example. I think I'm going to put in, we can, hold up. So this shows us a traditional function and an arrow function. And I think seeing the difference will be helpful. So a traditional function, we have a function, we have our two variables. Yes? The function wants us to return a plus b plus 100, right? So we have our two unknown variable values, and the function just wants us to return a plus b plus 100. So some integer value. By using an arrow function, we take out the word function, so no more word function, no more curly brackets. See? We just have a plus b, our variables, arrow, which kind of takes the place of the word function, a plus b plus 100. So it's basically just saying, I want to give you these two variables, and it's going to be a plus b plus 100. So this is a function. It condenses it down. But notice how, like, there's no more function words, so it's harder to identify as a function if you're just, like, skimming through your code. There's no return. So be careful with that, because return and print are two different things. Return just like returns the value back into the computer, but print out gives you a visual output. So if you wanted it to like show you the value, you have to use print out, not return. So be careful of that. So they're really just tricky things. I personally, at least for like the beginner class, like please you don't need to use them. You shouldn't, I honestly just think it would confuse more than it would do well. But that is my personal opinion. That is my 2 cents. You don't have to take my advice as Bible, but that's my personal recommendation on arrow functions. Okay, hopefully we understand them at least. I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to present this. All right. So, built-in functions. The functions are provided by JavaScript for you to use anytime without having to import libraries. So remember when I said don't name a function anything that's a keyword for a built-in function? This is what I was talking about. So Java and JavaScript try to be really, really helpful. And they give you all of these commands that are already built in. So remember how last week we went through our list of operators, and we had like slash meant divide, and we had like double asterisks meant like power of. So those are kind of like built-in operators. But Java does something really nice, and it gives you specific words that give you specific functions. So if you have console.log date, so this is a specific date is a specific built-in function. So date parentheses gives you it automatically gives you the date. So Friday, January 22nd, 2021. It automatically gives you the date. So by saying console.log, it prints out to the console the date. So date parentheses is an automatic built-in function. So you don't want to name your function date, because the computer will get confused and it will think that you want the automatic built-in function, and therefore that's what it will do, or it will cause a runtime error, or it will cause a compiler error. So it will get really confused. So when I say you can name your function anything you want, just not a built-in function name, this is what I'm talking about. Parse int 4.1. This is for something that's like rounding integers a little bit. So it's like 4.1, it rounds it down to 4, so it will print 4. Console.log is NaN 0 divided by 0. So it's kind of just like a true or false machine, this one. But yeah, when I say don't print, like don't name your functions something that have like already inherent values, these are the things I'm talking about. Don't name a function date. Don't name a function parse integer. Don't name it parse float. Don't name it is NaN. Conditionals.
Okay.
Used in code to perform different actions for different decisions. So if, else, else if. These guys are going to become your best friend, especially as you move into more complex coding. So what these guys do, they work as like a team of 3. So it's kind of like, I like to think of them as like the Jack, Queen, and King in a deck of cards. They're all slightly different, but they're all part of like the same, like, you know how like the Jack, Queen, and King are like different than like the regular numbers. That's how I like to think of these 3. So if always comes first, else if always comes second, and else always comes last. So basically what it's saying is like, it gives me what this allows me to do is to give me options within my code. So like if something doesn't work, backup plan. And if that backup plan fails, then all else fails. Here's your last and final option. But you can have as many of these as you want. So you can have, you can only have one if, and you can only have one else, but you can have as many else ifs as you want in your code. You can have 5, you can have 5,000, but it basically just gives you backup plans. That's how I like to think about it. So let's look at this example. Let's start with this one. If you only have 2 plans, you're going to use if and else. Don't use else if, because if you only have 2 plans, the computer, if you use else if, is going to look for the third one. So if you only have 2, if and else are good. Your first one's always going to be if. So like if a condition is true or if a condition is false. This is your booleans, right? So not everything here has to, not everything here has to be a boolean, but what the thing is saying, like if the condition is true or false, or let's think of it this way. If the condition set in these brackets has been met, so if the criteria of the condition have been met, then the code under it will execute. If the criteria for the condition have not been met, it will go to this different action. It will skip to the else, right? So if plan A, right? But if plan A, like if we can't run plan A, we're going to go to plan B, and that's else. So now we're going to go to this example. If, else, if, else. If plan A, if conditions for plan A are met, you're going to run plan A. If those conditions are not met, you're going to look to see if the conditions are met for plan B. If the conditions are met for plan B, then you're going to run plan B. If the conditions for plan A and plan B are both not met, you're going to run to plan C. Yes, no, maybe on the explanation. Do we have questions anew? How's the chat looking? Use those reactions, guys. Yes, no, maybe. I know this is tricky, but this is like the bread and butter of coding. That's good. I saw some thumbs up. I'm really glad, guys. Okay.
Can I ask a kind of specific question?
Go for it.
Okay, so last week I was trying to figure out how to, I was thinking about like this, but I didn't know how to do it, so I couldn't do it. But if you had the prompt come up and it was yes or no,
yes.
How can you do that if statement? So like if someone says yes, you make it go do one thing, or no? Would you just put like no or yes in like the code? Where would you put it? Would it be if yes, then?
No, I know exactly what you're saying. Okay. It's a little bit tricky because you have to do the response from the alert. So you have to, I don't want to go into this too much, but like if you would have to say like, if, I mean, when you think about it, fundamentally, you have two options. It's either yes or no. So I would say like, if, I can't remember the exact code for it, but it's like, if alert response yes, like system.out, or like print you selected yes, else you selected no. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I get it. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
If you want to like get into that, ask me when we're working through the code. Okay, conditionals example. If x is equal to 10, x is equal to 10. So this is an if block. Yes? So if x is equal to 10, if this condition is met, the console will print x is equal to 10. If it's not, it won't do anything. If else block. If x is equal to 10, it will print it's equal to 10. Else it will print it's not equal to 10. So makes sense. If x is equal to 10, it will print else x is equal to 10. Else if, so it's not equal to 10, but it's equal to 9, it will print x is equal to 9. And if it's not equal to 10 or 9, it will print x is not equal to 10 or 9. Yeah? Yeah. Okay. So switch statements. Type of conditional specifies many alternative blocks of code to be executed. So, yeah, an expression or variable value goes in parentheses, so it's like it's the same as the if-else value. So it's expression or value, entire block enclosed with curly brackets. So see how the curly brackets, it's here to here. Notice how with these ones, if has its own curly bracket set, else has its own curly bracket set. Not with the switch statements. The switch statements is just once you say switch until you want it to end, you don't close your curly brackets. Each case starts with a colon, and if a case ends with a break statement, each case ends with a break statement. So break in code just means like break, like take a break, stop for 2 seconds. Each case ends with a break statement. If case is true, it doesn't check the others. So this is like only good for yes or no things. So like if you wanted to know if an integer is above or below a value, like you wouldn't use this. You would just like want to say like is like, you would have like something like before this, like a good example of this, like you had something before this that was like x is equal to 5, right? So like in the switch you would have like this, x is equal to 5. Yes. Case x is less than 5, and you print x is less than 5. Break. Case y, x is equal to 5. Console prints x is 5. Break. You could also have like case z, where it's like x is greater than 5, and it prints that. So it basically just like if-else statements, but it just like cascades through them, and as soon as it finds one that works, it stops. Right? So default is like the final, like remember how I said use else as the last one and use if as the first one? Well, in this case, instead of using if and if else, you're just going to use case, but your last one is always going to be default, right? So it's like the default very last plan. Yes, how do we feel about switch statements? Do we have any questions? Anu, what's the chat looking like?
So I seem to miss like a question maybe from the previous slides.
Okay, we can go back.
The previous slide, it asked, yeah. She asked, what does actions do?
This like action is just the execution code. So like in this case, this is the action. Console.log is equal, x is equal to 10. That's the action code. So action is just like the thing that happens when the thing is true. Yeah? So it's just like what happens when it is true. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Any other questions?
So far none.
Awesome. Okay, great. This is just a switch statement example. We'll go through this quickly. Variable name, Marie. So the variable of name has the value of Marie. Switch name, expression be evaluated is the name variable. If the name is Ida, it will print, did you know Ida Lovelace was the first computer programmer? If the name is Marie, it will print, you share a name with Marie Curie. And default, it will print, hi, name, exclamation point. So in this case, the name is Marie. So we'll go to the case Ida, and it will say, well, the name is not Ida, so we're going to ignore this. Then it will go to the case Marie, and it will say, oh, the name is Marie. Okay, so it will print out, you share a name with Marie Curie. Yeah, but if if the variable name was my name, Willa, it would say, oh, well, the name isn't Ida, so we're going to ignore this. And the name isn't Marie, so we're also going to ignore that. So what we're going to do is we're going to print, hi, Willa, exclamation point. And this is another example of our concatenated statements. Remember, we insert the variable like that with our plus signs. Okay, return statement. A return statement ends a JavaScript function. Functions can also return values. So see this like return input? This is different than like printing. I mean, so basically what a return means is it returns the information that was given it back to the computer. So like what it means is, like, say I have this input. So like this input name is like Ife. So it inputs it, but when I say return, what it does with the name Ife, it takes it back to the computer and it's like, okay, so the name we're using is Ife. And it just makes a little, the equivalent of return is like just making a mental note of it. And then when we say variable name equals ask name, how's it going? And we print console log hi name, it will be like, oh my gosh, name. We know what that is. The name is Ife. Remember, we made a little mental note of that when we returned the input. So that's what returning does. To end a function, return whatever value input you had, because it just it updates the computer with the current information. So to return a value, add the value after return. So like in this case, we return input. But like if you were having a variable, like say this was like numbers and you had a variable called like or like a variable like B, you could like return B, you know, or like return name, return input. A good way of saying it is like return input, but it varies depending on what kind of code you're using. Prompt can be assigned to input because it returns a value. So the prompt works here because the prompt has an input value, right? So we're assigning the input variable. So we're creating a variable called input, and we're assigning it to the prompt value. And then it just returns it back. Oh, do we have any questions about this? Anu, what's the chat saying?
Okay, we do have one. Okay, one question is, why isn't hi, okay, quotations hi, quotations plus input, and then plus exclamation mark at the end there, since there's no identity tag.
Why does it say name instead of why does it say name instead of input? Yeah, so
I think the question is, yeah.
Why does this say name instead of input?
They said yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's look at line 5 upwards for now. So just, let me get my pointer. Just here up. If we just had like alert greeting, variable input prompt, what's your name, return input, you would be 100% right. It should be hi plus input. But see this variable name, right? So it takes the variable name, and all of a sudden anything that was put, so remember our ask name, how's it going variable thing? So it takes the value that's gotten from the function ask name and assigns it as the variable name. So this is your key here, this variable name equals ask name. So variable name equals ask name basically just says like, oh, well, the input that's coming in from this function, it's actually a variable called name. Like you're going to call it input in the function, but this right here overrides this because it's like the larger umbrella. Okay, so that's your Replit, that's your submission form. Let's go to the Replit now. And remember, everyone, as soon as we get to the Replit, what's the first thing we're gonna do? Say it in the chat, say it out loud. Fork it, fork it. We love forking it. All right, if we forget how to fork it, remember this little down arrow and we're gonna press fork. This down arrow and we're gonna press fork. We're gonna press fork. We're not gonna touch the code, we're gonna press fork. Fork, 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 very important. Okay, so fun fact, today our project is a little quiz show. I'm gonna go through it quickly. Okay, so capital Cameroon, I think this is it from my memory. Basically, it's a quiz show. You get the answer right, you move on to the next question. You know, if you get all 3 questions right, you win the quiz. The most important thing, and I want to demonstrate this. Running. Why is it not running? You get the question wrong, it says you lost, and then you have to play again until you win. So it's a quiz. You either win or you lose. Does anyone want me to go through the JavaScript code quickly? Oh my God, I know for a fact that Christian's kids are on this editing it, but we're gonna ignore that. Okay, so I'm gonna go through the JavaScript code really quick because that's what we're here to learn. So function correct answer, Q number. If Q number is less than 3, window location replace Q number. So basically what this does is it says like, oh, if the number is like, so there's 3 questions. That's why this is less than 3. So replace Q with Q number .html. So like basically what it does is it just like takes you back to like the like if you get the correct answer, then it adds 1 to like, it takes the question number and then it adds 1 to the question number, because notice how it's like Q1, Q3, Q2. So it takes 1 to the question number and then it takes you to the next web page for the next question. Else, which means you got through all 3 questions, you go to the win.html, which is like, oh, you won, you answer all the questions correctly. Yeah, I'm gonna stop sharing. Do we have any questions?